How's it going, guys? Chris Williams, REI, real estate entrepreneur out of Central California. Man, do I have a story for you today. Really excited about this. I actually set up to record an interview with a buddy of mine who has acquired over $150 million worth of commercial property here in the last 3 years. So there's a little pause on that. But I just thought in that meantime, I would record this video going over how I recently made 100 grand on a very, very easy fix and flip. And I want to show you how you can do it too. Stay until the end. You got to watch the whole thing. And by the way, like the video, subscribe. Let's get into this. So long story short, this past year back in May, my wife and I had our 5th child. Now, if you don't know, this is actually 5 kids in 4 years, right? So my twin boys who were first are now just recently turned 5. So when our 5th baby was born, our boys were actually 4. So we had 5 kids in 4 years. Crazy. So long story short, I basically took almost 2 months off from work because, I couldn't leave my wife home. Right after having a baby, leave her home with 5 kids. So I stayed home and I basically barely worked. And that is not to brag. Financially we were okay, but really something crazy happened. In that time, I ended up buying 4 fix and flips and off of doing no marketing and almost barely any work. Honestly, I got to thank God for it. Very blessed. I went on essentially 4 appointments and I got all of them. But this one deal, absolutely insane. I want to share this with you, how I made basically 100 grand. It was like $99,750 on a very easy fix and flip. So this lead came in and it was actually from my Carrot website. And of course, you can go down below, click the link and take a demo view, look through the Carrot website. If you don't have a Carrot website for generating seller leads, really recommend it. Here's the thing. This guy landed on my website, called me, and I answered. And even though there were kids home, last year, my wife and I made a commitment. And that was basically when my business numbers rang for potential sellers, I was going to be committed to answering my phone and taking the lead. And that would mean walking outside the room, walking outside the living room and going to my room, closing the door and taking that call. So this gentleman called me. He owned a house actually a little bit out of town. It's about another city, about an hour and 15 from me. And basically he told me he and his wife were ready to sell this house. They needed to get rid of it. He was kind of lost in the mix, didn't know where to begin. So he told me when the pandemic hit as a truck driver, he ended up being laid off. He was out of work for a year and basically had all kinds of deferred payments on his mortgage, although they hadn't filed a pre-foreclosure. They were very close to. This house was actually built in 2012. And so we talked for about 30 minutes and he just told me basically his life story, where he was at. The house has been empty for a year. He, his wife, his kid thought that they were going to lose the home. So they up and left the house, moved in with his in-laws. And basically the house was sitting there with furniture, like about half furniture and their clothes and dishes and all that stuff. It's just been sitting there for a year. And they just came to a point where they realized that they won't be able to catch up. This house is going to be too much. They're ready to basically let it go and start over, but they wanted to get something in their pocket. So after about 35 minutes of talking, I just really started to dig deep. I did not want to throw out an offer just because I knew that it could potentially be a really good deal, but I wanted to be able to get him what he needed to move on. So in conversation, I basically asked him several times, I tried to get out of him what he owed. He didn't really know, but based on when he purchased it, when he originally had his mortgage, plus there was a second on there, I estimated maybe about $102,000, $103,000 is what he owed. So talking about that number, I asked him, hey, based on you maybe owing about 103, what do you guys need in your pocket to be able to move on and start your life over somewhere else and get rid of this burden? And so I asked him that question maybe 2, 3, 4 different ways. And he said he didn't really know, maybe 10 grand. So I asked him, so that puts you at about 114, 115, right? After, maybe paying some extra fees, attorney fees or whatever, since you're in pre-foreclosure. Yeah, that sounds about right. He'd probably want to do that and pay off some credit card debt that they had accumulated in that time. But he was not ready to sign, was not ready to move forward. He said, hey, I need to talk to my wife. I'll get the exact numbers and then I'll call you back. He ended up speaking with his wife, calling me that night. And he said, we need about 22 grand, $22,000. So I was like, okay, about 103 plus 21, 22, that puts you at like 125, 126. So you're saying if I can give you 126, we sign today, we open escrow today, technically tomorrow because it was nighttime, and get you about 20, 21, 22 grand money in your pocket, you guys are ready to move on and get this closed within the next couple of weeks and start over. And he said, yeah, that sounds good. We're ready to go. So what's crazy is before that, I had comped it, and I figured this house was probably worth about 220 with maybe 15, 20 grand of work. I figured since it had been lived in, maybe it needs some repairs, some updates, paint, carpet, that kind of thing, landscaping. So I was like, in my mind, I was thinking, man, this is going to be a really good deal. Penciled it in at about maybe making 65 to 70 on it as a quick flip. I told him like, yeah, I would be willing to do that. Let me send you a DocuSign. So he said, okay, I'm ready to sign. So I sent him the DocuSign. He ended up signing the next morning. And then I opened escrow that day. The very following day, I drove out to the property and I looked at it and I was like, man, this house barely needs anything. It's in really good shape. Barely lived in, even though they had owned it for about 9 years. I walked it, took pictures, and I said, okay, let's get this done. Escrow's already open. They're going to be in contact with you. Let's get it closed. So it ended up being a pretty smooth transaction to buy it. The only thing was it was not a 2-week escrow like I wanted to. His first mortgage was USDA. On the USDA website, they said that they get the payoff demands back in 2 weeks. It took about 35 days for them to get their exact numbers over so that we could finalize that payoff, pay it off completely. I bought this for $126, and I actually got a first deed of trust from a private lender for $155. So in that, I basically wholesaled it to myself for 10 grand, exactly 10 grand, took that fee up front. And then that left me with a little over 16 grand of a check that I picked up that I could then put into the property. Cause I figured I would probably end up putting about 15 grand, some paint, interior, exterior paint, doing a little bit no flooring, light fixtures, those kind of things, clean up yard. So I ended up getting 155 first deed of trust. Now, unfortunately, I held this property for a little bit longer than what I wanted to. I think I held it for about 4 months. I originally gave him 21 days to get his stuff out. He took about a month and a half to get all of his stuff out, and then for me to bring in a handyman. Now, again, this little city was almost an hour and a half, about an hour 15 from me. So I couldn't find any workers out there. So I ended up calling one of my handymen here in Fresno, who then went out there. Once it became vacant, it took about 2 weeks for me to actually get people there to get rolling, getting the work going and all that. What's awesome here is even though I had 16 grand to go in and do a light remodel, I ended up spending just over 11 grand. At the end of the day, I still had 5 grand in my account left over from this property. Like I told you, I originally comped it about 220, maybe max 225. In that time, several sales had happened. In that neighborhood, there was a house that was a little bit better than mine that sold for like 255 or 260. Another one that sold for 245. I mean, I was absolutely blown away at how quickly values in that neighborhood risen 20, 30 grand. When I was ready to put it on the market, since I am an agent and I acquired the deal myself, I decided that I would list it myself and take advantage of that extra $5,000, $6,000 commission. So I listed it at $249.99. I received about 7 or 8 offers within about 3 or 4 days. So I settled on an offer of $255. Now I had offers less than that. I had offers over that. Looking at it, I thought it was a very clean, solid offer, local lender. So I settled on $255, and they guaranteed an appraisal gap, appraisal gap of 5 grand over the appraisal up to the purchase price of $255. So cool. Now we ran into a snag here in escrow, literally up to like 2 days before we were supposed to close. I was out of town in the mountains at a cabin with my family, enjoying my time, and I get this call from the lender. Basically, I don't know if you know, FHA has a 90-day flip rule where they will not allow a FHA buyer to go into escrow within the first 90 days after a home has been purchased. We were past that, but the thing is they also have a 180-day flip rule, which means that they won't fund a property that is selling for 100% over what it was originally purchased for within the last 100 days. So I was at like 104, 105%, something like that, because bought at 126 and we were in escrow for 255. So it was right over it. So talking to the lender, talking to the agent, basically the lender said the max we could go was probably 251. This would be the safe place. It would be right under 100%, 99% over that original purchase price. And I was reluctant, and it wasn't so much about the dollar amount of dropping 4 grand. It was the principle of, I had multiple offers. I had multiple strong offers, and I trusted this offer. I mean, I didn't account for it. The lender didn't account for it. The loan officer didn't account for it. So really, I felt like, man, I shouldn't have to eat this cost when this is the price that I agreed to, that everybody agreed to. But now all of a sudden, at the end, the lender couldn't do it. Now, the other stipulation was it's either 180 days or 2 appraisals. The lender did not order 2 appraisals at the beginning. They should have looked at title. They should have caught that. I probably should as well. I looked at it as like this isn't my fault. We all agreed to it. And 2 days before, you realize that this is a problem, I don't think I should have to eat that cost. So I went back to the buyer's agent. We talked about it. She's like, look, I'll cut my commission down. I was originally going to give $1,000 credit for the repairs. There was like a microwave needed to be replaced. Dishwasher needed to be fixed. That was it. And so she's like, let's get the buyer's willing to waive the repairs. And then I told her, like, I don't really feel like you have to be penalized for this. I do feel like it's the lender's fault, but we just got to deal with it. Because at the time, there were barely any appraisers. I mean, appraisals were taking 21, 28 days from being ordered in order to be complete. So yeah, we could do the second appraisal and I could get the price I want, but I don't want to hold this house for another 3 or 4 weeks. I'm going to pay more interest, more property taxes, insurance. I'm going to come out of pocket another $1,500, $2,000 just to get another $1,500, $2,000. It didn't really make sense. The buyer's agent came back to me and she said, look, I talked to my client. They originally were ready to put in $5,000 in cash over appraisal if something happened. So she's willing to waive the repairs at $1,000. Since you're at $251, she will cut you a check for $3,000, and that will basically give you, that $255. So she said she was really willing to do that. She thought she would do that in the beginning. She has the money. I just thought that's actually really fair, because basically I get what I originally agreed to. The buyer pays what they originally agreed to pay, and we get this closed in like 3 days. So we decided to do that, even though on record sold it for $251, got a little bit more. So here's the numbers on it. I bought for $126. Again, I got that first deed of trust for $155, $10,000 in fees. So after closing costs, escrow fees, all that kind of stuff, I was left over with just over $16,000. For holding this house for, let's see, 7/15 to 11/24. That's, what is that? 4.5 months, right? I paid, since I was 10% annual to my private lender, that I actually didn't have to pay interest until I sold it. I spent $5,605.49 in interest to my lender. I got a $6,000 commission to myself, and because it is my own personal deal, because I'm with Real Broker, love it, by the way, absolutely love that. If you're looking to switch agencies, definitely hit me up about Real Broker, love it. Since it's a personal deal, it was 100% commission. I can do 3 a year. So I took that 100% commission minus like an admin fee. I think it was like $250. So $6,000 commission. I was left over with $5,000 in my account for my rehab funds. Paid myself $10,000 at the front. I had $3,000 in cash from the buyer, and then I have reimbursements, right? So there's always an escrow reimbursement. It's like $281. And then because we prepay insurance, when I sell a house, I end up getting like $200-$300 back. So I ended up getting about $500 in checks back to me about 2 or 3 weeks after that. So in total, this deal was $99,751. Insane. And I just dropped my pen. Insane. This is crazy. And the crazy thing is I didn't have to use my credit. Nobody had to run my credit. Nobody had to check my credit score, my credit history, verify my income. It was the ability to raise that kind of funds was in the quality of the deal. I mean, buying 126 for something that was worth over 200 right then, right? I could have probably just turned around and put it on the market for 210 or something like that and made, I don't know, 80 grand. But I'm glad I didn't. I mean, this was a really good deal. But the thing is, anybody can do it. You can do it. You have the ability to go out and to buy this kind of deal, right? Like, yeah, I'm in California, but this isn't a $700,000, $800,000 house. This is a house I bought for $126 in a good middle-class city, in a good middle-class neighborhood that is sold for $251, technically $254. Long story short, you could do it too. And here I'm screen recording, and you can see this house. I mean, look at this house. I hope it's still screen recording. Looks sold for $251 on 11/24. But come down here to the transaction history, wherever that is. Look, 7/21. It's technically 7/15. Some reason it didn't hit Zillow until 7/21. I bought for $126, listed it for $249. We sold for $251. And again, the buyer came out of pocket a little bit to reimburse me for that difference. And I mean, look at this house. This was built in 2012. I mean, honestly, this is actually the power of SEO and Carrot websites. Is this seller was not talking to any other investor, right? Some people, they clamor about, oh, my website's going to look like everybody else. It doesn't matter. Most people who go and they Google sell my house fast for cash, they're calling the first website that they land on. And I wasn't even, ranking in the top, the top 3 or 4 for this. I don't know where I was ranking for the keywords, but definitely wasn't the top, 3 or 4. But this gentleman landed on my website. The website built trust. He saw a picture of me and my wife and my family on there, and he just called me looking for help. I mean, that's the power of SEO. That's the power of Carrot websites, real estate in general, right? I made 100 grand using none of my own money. I mean, that has an infinite return. I mean, you think about, you put 100 grand in the stock market, appreciates 7%. That's awesome. Whatever that is, stocks and crypto, they're amazing. Not to knock it, but look at the power of real estate. I can't go buy 100 grand of, Bitcoin or Doge or anything like that with somebody else's money. I mean, could, but not to this extent, right? With real estate, it's easy. There are people who make a living lending to people like me, lending to people like you. I mean, so look at this house. It's a very quick flip. Like I said, 11 grand, put laminate tile floor down on here. We did a new faucet here. It came with this like Formica, again, 2012, built in 2012, so 10-year-old home. Shampooed the carpets, fixed the AC. Didn't do all new light fixtures, but a lot of new light fixtures. Painted the exterior trim. Right, so this was like this weird brownish green color on the trim and the door. So I added shutters. So I made it pop a little bit, cleaned up the yard, gotta clean the yard, put those sprinklers on the timer. So when it hit the market, it was a little bit greener. Yeah, but look at this. And then, so here's the actual closing statement. I'm gonna zoom in so you can't see everything because, it has my private lender's name. Coming over here, you can see here's this commission, $62.75, minus the $250 admin fee. All right, so $75,000 plus the $6,000 commission. I picked up 81 grand from escrow, almost 82 grand, plus all those other fees, the overage, the balance that I had, paying myself $10,000. That's almost 100 grand, man. Hey, if you're not flipping or wholesaling or even wholesaling, why aren't you? I mean, honestly, if you've watched this far and you haven't started yet, please drop a comment and tell me why. And, maybe I can comment back and help you figure out what it is that's stopping you. But honestly, guys, this business is amazing. I mean, the month that this closed, I had other flips closing. We had this past November was well into the 6 figures for monthly revenue. I mean, this is net revenue, right? I don't have to pay employees. I don't pay anything out of that money that's right there because I run a very low overhead. But really, this is the power of real estate. This is the power of flipping, wholesaling, buy and hold. I mean, I could have held on to this property and had over 100 grand in equity and again, come out of pocket, nothing for it. That is the power of real estate. And I keep repeating that and I keep saying it because I think you need to understand, if you haven't started yet, you have to start right now. There is no better time to start than right this second. Like the video, subscribe, share it if you got value out of it. Hopefully breaking down the numbers, you can kind of understand a little bit better how the business works, holding costs. Of course I had insurance and utilities, water bill, electricity, gas, all that kind of stuff that I had as well. But that was all paid out of the funds that my private lender loaned me. And if you're interested in kind of understanding how and where I raise private capital, I have another video called Finding Private Lenders with PropStream, something like that. I'll also link down below. You've got to watch that, kind of understand how and where to find private lenders using PropStream. There's other ways, networking, just asking people, that kind of thing. Hey, like the video, subscribe. I will see you next time. Take care.